Howdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 4 of the EERSS podcast, produced by Terrier TV. Wow, episode 4. Okay. Yep.
I can't believe it.
We're still counting along.
Episode 4.
Mr. Curtis, how are you doing?
I am good. I am currently at war.
Wow, those are strong.
Yes.
Strong letters.
Yes, I am at war. I
Three
have
very
been.
strong
I have
letters.
been invaded.
By
A
was it a
squirrel.
varmint?
I have a squirrel.
It was a varmint.
It was a varmint.
I knew we were somehow going to varmints.
A varmint.
100% knew a varmint was
I
involved.
have a squirrel who has decided to take up residence in my attic.
Okay.
And so every day I seal up the spot that he goes, and then I go home and I find out where he's dug in again, and then I seal that up. And so that's gone on for like about 5-6 days now. And so I'm waiting for him to give up.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, please do.
So in your attic, put a radio up there and leave the radio playing.
Oh, okay.
It works for raccoons. It works for possums. It works for squirrels. Not all the time, but a large percentage of the time that'll work. It'll keep them out of your attic.
Okay.
Once they've already tried to make up a home there. But
it
makes them uncomfortable. I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of music you play. If you're playing something real laid back.
What am I playing? Do I play country music? Do I play like
It
top
depends
40?
on your squirrel. It depends
What
on your
kinda-
squirrel.
Okay.
Yeah, but I guess
So I'm trying to, maybe some easy listening. Maybe the squirrel doesn't like elevator music or something.
he might not. It would
So
drive
he might
anybody
not.
crazy.
Yeah. So that
Maybe he
could work.
listens to a podcast.
Maybe we just play the podcast on repeat, and that'll get.
He's like,
him
this
to
is the
go
guy I
like,
listen to downstairs all the time.
Yeah, I'm not.
He's
doing
up here
this.
right now.
I'm out of here. I
Yeah.
can't do this.
That might
anymore.
make him quit. I
I
don't
might
know.
do it. I might do it.
Then again, he might move his whole family in at that point.
That's right. He might be. Well, this is friendly. These are friendly.
good, these are good, happy people. We like them. Come on, kids. Come on in. Cindy, how are you
Invite
doing?
the birds. I'm good. I'm afraid to say this out loud because I'm afraid the universe will view it as a challenge, but I've had a quiet, boring week.
Okay.
Oh, you did it.
I
now.
should
You
have.
did it now. Oh.
Quiet and boring week.
I'm pretty sure everyone I work with is like, why? Why would you say that?
It's good though.
It's like working in a fast food restaurant and saying, "Boy, it sure is slow tonight."
Yeah.
That's all you got to say.
Wow.
Okay.
So, I brought you something. I brought you a little something. I'm gonna give it to you. You gotta make sure not to open it by the mic, otherwise it's gonna be super, super loud. But I'm gonna hand this to Mr. Curtis, and he's
I
gonna
can
hand this to
only
you.
imagine what this is going to be.
Oh.
Do I know what it is?
I don't know if you know what it is or not, but
I
you
think I do.
you might know what it is.
Okay. I'm away from the mic.
Yes.
So, Cindy's been having an ongoing issue with a varmint. Yes, a non-rodent varmint
Non-rodent varmint. Yeah.
that has been destroying pretty much everything in her backyard. Not everything, just her important fish. And wow, that is some serious tape. Oh, my garage here. This is going nuts. This is totally going to be worth it, I think, once we get to what the item actually is. Bear with it. Because I think it's going to maybe solve all of her issues.
I'm still going to be opening this by the time we get to next episode.
Okay. This is funny. It's worth the wait if you're watching. If you're just listening, you can just imagine in your head what it might be. It's actually, there's more to it than it looks. He actually extends. So I mean, he's got stilts for legs, but you can consider that you and your husband's pond warming gift. Yes.
Thank you.
And it'll keep his identical twin away.
It better, because I've given up all hope.
Is he still hanging out?
I saw him yesterday, briefly.
Wow.
He's looking pretty skinny because he's already eaten everything. So
He had one really
You
full
haven't
day.
Replenished
Yeah.
the fish.
Yep. He got used to a certain set of
he
things.
just keeps staring at me like, "Come on, I'm hungry."
Oh Lord. Well, while
I
you're
love
doing
it.
while
It's
you're doing
perfect.
that, let's get to our guest. Mr. Mike Knight of the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. Thank you so much for being with us. If I can start by saying, most people probably don't understand the vital importance that the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program plays in our county's environment and health and everything else. There's so many important species that threatened, endangered, protected species that live on these lands. We don't really have any huge wildlife corridors left other than what we find on these lands. Uh, yeah, I could go on for the next hour about the importance of the EEL program, and just thanks a bunch for being here, Mike.
Thank you, Frank. Appreciate being here.
So let's start with this. How did the EEL program get its start?
So the EEL program started in 1990 as part of a property tax referendum. Little bit of unknown history is that it actually went to the polls in '89 and it failed for the first time. And the reason that it failed was believed that there was not a scientific premise behind what the program was going to do. So all of the decisions related to how land would be selected was basically going to be done by our county commission. And I think people felt uncomfortable with that kind of decision being political potentially. So in 1990, after that failure, the county commission created a science-based premise. They created what's called the selection committee, which is a science-based committee. And it basically means that any land that was going to be proposed for acquisition would go through that committee first. And no lands could end up for consideration by the county commission unless they passed through that science filter. So it went back to the voters in 1990 and it passed.
So how many properties do you guys have currently with the EEL program?
So overall, there's been about 29,000 acres that's been protected. We only manage about 18,000 of those because we have some partner agencies that manage some of those lands.
And what are the big conservation roles that you guys are playing right now? What are the major species you're looking after?
Well, there's really a variety. I mean, both trying to address the protection of threatened and endangered species like the Florida scrub jay and the gopher tortoise and those kinds of things, but also trying to look ahead to the future and make sure that our other species don't become threatened or endangered.
Yeah, I was telling somebody earlier this week about the importance these properties play in human health. If you think about all the species on these properties that kill vectors, disease vectors like ticks and rats and everything else, they'd be taking over our county if it wasn't for these properties and simple things like possums and gopher tortoise burrows that house snakes and other things that eat mice and rats. It kind of all plays into a huge conservation role, wouldn't you say?
It would, yeah. And I think probably a really good example of that is the Fox Lake Sanctuary here in Titusville. I remember when we first bought that land, there were so many ticks on that property because it had been overgrown for nearly 50 years without seeing a prescribed or a natural fire cycle. So when those things happen, the ticks just go crazy. And now you go up there and wander through the woods all over the place, and it's not very common to get a tick anymore.
Yeah, I did a survey on that property, and yeah, I remember long time ago, like you're saying, that place you could see the ticks walking across the ground,
Yeah.
and now it seemed like every day I was out there, I came across at least 2 possums, and everything's maintained well. Fire makes a big, huge role in that. Tell us about the role of fire in conservation.
Well, fire is critical in most Florida landscapes. All these landscapes here evolved with fire because Florida is really one of the highest lightning strike locations on the planet. So historically, lightning always hit, and vegetation falls from the trees and lands on the ground and accumulates. And when it does that, it catches fire most of the time when lightning strikes. So it happened all the time. Our landscapes, particularly like pine flatwoods and scrub habitat, have become completely dependent upon fire, including all the species that are there. And without it, the sites, those habitats grow up and they have too much leaf litter, too much understory, it's too thick, and animals can't move through it. It becomes shaded, and the sun's not hitting the floor of the forest anymore, and the food sources that are there aren't growing the way they should.
I've noticed also that you guys, unlike some other conservation agencies, you are not only just managing the property, you're managing the wildlife on the property through fire, which is very different. A lot of people I don't think realize that, but there's a big difference between managing the property and the wildlife with fire, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, there certainly is a misunderstanding that wildlife is somehow hurt by fire. and that is could just the opposite. They depend on it. It's a very critical process to maintain food sources and open space and those kinds of things for those species and the plants as well.
How is Brevard County and the EEL program specifically working toward educating the community about all this stuff?
Well, we have 3 environmental education centers. We have the Enchanted Forest here in Titusville. We have the Sam's House in North Merritt Island at Pine Island Conservation Area, and then we have the Barrier Island Center in South Melbourne Beach. There was a master plan to have a 4th center down in Malabar. We still have some money set aside for that, and but it'll take some additional funding at some point in time to have the resources to actually build that and to manage it and operate it.
So the main goals of these properties are conservation, education, and then passive recreation. What kind of opportunities for that does the program provide?
So we have over 75 miles of public use trails throughout the lands that we manage. And passive recreation is defined as any recreation use or conglomerate of a variety of uses that do not take away from the ecological goals of the property. So primarily these properties are purchased and set aside for conservation. Public use is a secondary consideration. It is important, but we have to make sure that the public use of the property is not taking away from its original intent for its acquisition.
So I'm going to open a can of worms here because now seems like as good a time as any. Speaking of those public recreation areas, I know there's some controversy that's been going on with your efforts to protect and preserve areas for scrub jays down in Palm Bay. Tell me about that. Tell me about the science behind it. Tell us about what's going on.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great example. So the Malabar Scrub Sanctuary was acquired in the mid-90s, early 90s, I guess. It was the first scrub jay habitat property that was acquired by the EEL program for the protection of the Florida scrub jay. By the time the county acquired the property, it had been through about 30 years or more of fire exclusion. So it had become developed all around it, and the landscape had grown up with too many trees. Scrub habitat has very few trees in it. Scrub habitat is the old relic sand dunes from back when the ocean used to be more inland. And these relic sand dunes became populated by only certain types of species because there's not a lot of nutrients in the sand. So those habitats grew up, and the Florida scrub jay and other scrub species evolved. So the Florida scrub jay is an endemic bird that is only found here in Florida. It's the only place it exists. And so the Malabar Scrub Sanctuary is about a 500-acre sanctuary, sits smack dab in the middle of a scrub ridge. And what happened is over the 30 years, the trees got too big. By the time the county started managing the property, we tried to get the trees under control with prescribed fires. We have had several restoration projects on the property. We have tried to, in the past, leave some trees along some of the trail corridors for the visitors, with the understanding that we might have to come back and deal with it later, because if the restoration works and the scrub jays start returning, then those trees are a problem for the scrub jay. They're a problem because they shade out the landscape. They're a problem because they cover up the sandy openings that scrub jays need to store their acorns. They create perching habitat for hawks that kill the scrub jays. And that's important more now today than it was a long time ago when we had lots of scrub jays. And it didn't matter that they were being eaten every once in a while by hawks. But now that we're managing postage stamp size sites with very small populations, that's a problem. So there was a recent study that was done. It was a population viability analysis, and what it did is it took a look at all the scrub jays in Brevard County, including the Kennedy Space Center. And they were analyzed with a method, a modeling method that's used for zoos, for captive wildlife populations. So this is why animals in zoos are moved around to maintain adequate genetic diversity. If they're not, they will just breed themselves into extinction. So the same thing was happening with the scrub jay. And so that study showed us that unfortunately, all the scrub jays in North Brevard County and Central Brevard County, with the exception of the Kennedy Space Center, because they have a large enough isolated population, is going to go extinct.
Wow.
In 20 years. Excuse me. And it showed us that South Brevard has a large enough population and a large enough landscape that we can stop that from happening. But Malabar scrub is one site where it's critical that we maintain that site in an optimal condition. So what's happening there is the trees have to come down, and that's making the users upset because they don't understand why trees would have to come down, and they worry that it impacts other species and that kind of thing. But it's going to be wonderful for all those species. It's completely the opposite of the way people are perceiving it, but it's very counterintuitive, right? That you're
it's different
taking
than what
trees
we're
down.
used to. Normally,
Right.
when we think about protecting lands, we think about leaving the trees and protecting the trees.
Right. So if you let, in this case, there's a lot of overgrown scrub oaks. They've gotten 30, 40 years old because fire hasn't been able to take care of them. So they're too
Basically,
big.
those lands are only the way they are now because of human interference.
That's right.
These lands aren't supposed to look this way.
That's
They never
exactly right.
historically were this way.
Yeah, yeah. And if we were only dealing with gopher tortoises or other scrub species and not the scrub jay, then we wouldn't really have to be taking down all the trees. We could have more trees there and still open the landscape up. We wouldn't be having this debate. But because this site is dealing specifically with Florida scrub jay, and we have an active population there that's responding to the restoration, that's really where the controversy is.
So they don't travel across a certain height of tree too, am I correct about that? They don't like to travel between properties or between corridors that have a certain height of foliage?
Yeah, they're not good flyers. They don't travel very far. It's rare for them to move too far. They live in family groups. They're more like meerkats at the zoo, where you see all of them out there and there's one that's always, watching. Well, they have a sentinel in the family that watches over. They live in family groups, 25-acre territories, and they fend off the other groups from their territories. There's only one breeding pair in each family. And so they have to have trees far enough apart so that when those hawks are coming in, that sentinel bird can detect them and warn the group to get down in the vegetation.
That's a true credit locally too to the recovery of birds of prey would you not say? That has to be a concern. I mean, that birds of prey have really made a comeback,
Yes.
especially here in Brevard.
Right.
Yeah,
For
that's
sure.
the change of pesticides over years, right?
That and yeah. And now we're in a situation where we're always having to find a new balance, right? I mean, we only have so many jays and so many landscapes to manage, and so that's why we get put in these predicaments where we have to make compromises on certain things.
Especially considering people often say, "Oh, well, it's just one species. Is that big of a deal?" But studies for decades have shown that it's never just one species. If one species goes extinct, it's sure to follow in the coming years. More will go extinct. It snowballs.
That's right. That's right. And this program, and particularly this property, was purchased specifically for this purpose. So for us to look, and not to fully, roll out the science that we have on it would be irresponsible for us for that particular species.
What needs to happen over the coming years to stop the extinction?
Well, scrub habitat has to be managed in an optimal condition. Scrub habitat is in a constant state of flux. So there's really no such thing as old growth scrub, except for the fact that all of the rootstock that's in the soil is old growth. Because when you do a fire and you burn it, you're only top killing the vegetation. All the rootstock is still alive and vibrant, and it sprouts back. And that's the whole idea, is recycling the nutrients back into the soil so that rootstock can. And scrub oaks, for example, they get too big. They're not supposed to be that big. They're supposed to be small, 6 to 10 feet. And that's where most of their acorn production is, at that size. Once they start to get too big, they're not really serving the purpose of providing acorns for the jays. So it's maintaining that habitat in an optimal condition. So it's about 4 to 6 feet is an ideal condition for the jays. 1 to 2 trees per acre. fires that go through the landscape on cycles of anywhere from 3 to 10 years, depending on how well it's responding.
A lot like a natural lightning strike would, correct?
Right, and then as we start to get the habitat back under control, and we try to do just that, so we try to mimic a lightning strike, which we'll go in with some machinery and sloppy chop the vegetation so the fire goes through it irregularly and the whole site doesn't burn up all at once. Because you obviously don't want to burn up all their habitat each time. You burn it in small units. You try to burn it in a mosaic so there's always green available for them to be in.
It's a lot different than the way a lot of properties are managed, that are being managed just specifically for the properties. The way you guys burn, the way you guys operate is a lot different than a lot of other places.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're trying to do for the users is we expect that we'll be moving some of our trails out of the scrub areas and into areas that will not have to be burned or restored in the future because they're a different type of habitat. So there are some places where it looks like we'll be able to probably relocate about a mile of trail into those areas, which should help with that.
So would I be fair in saying that first and foremost, these properties were set aside for the protection and the protection of species above beyond all else, especially a property like the one you're speaking of? I mean, it's nice that people can go there and use them and have them there to be able to recreate on, but I think it's important to be reminded those species that are especially endangered species that's the paramount. That's the top priority. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also really important that we have opportunities for people to use the sites and enjoy the sites. We just have to make sure we find that right balance for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
How over the old properties? Any idea how many endangered species you guys have?
I believe there's about 21. Don't ask me to name them all because I probably couldn't do that. But
Say I'm pretty sure it's one of the top places in the world as far as endangered and protected species in one area, Brevard County, Mare Island, everything included.
Yeah, Brevard County is really unique because of where we sit along the East Coast. Biodiversity is a big buzzword you hear a lot, and that's because we are right at the zone between the temperate area, the temperate climate, and the subtropics. So we have subtropical species and temperate species mixing all together. So we really have more species than the tropics and more species than the temperate zone north of us, which is why if you pay any attention when you're driving up and down I-95, throughout Brevard County, it's lined with Brazilian pepper trees, exotic invasive Brazilian pepper trees. But as soon as you start getting into northern Volusia County, that starts to really disappear a lot. And you don't see that when you get a little further north. It's just because the climate changes. Same reason we don't have our good friend, the pythons up this way, right?
Yep.
You would know about that.
Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. Every now and then, but yeah, the cold will take them out up here. Yep. Traditionally. So tell us about the upcoming vote next year for this program and what it means to the future of the EEL program.
So we don't really know at this point whether there will be an upcoming vote. I think that discussion will start to get kicked off tomorrow, actually, at the County Commission Budget Workshop. That's the first time that in a while that the EEL program will come up under that discussion, other than talking about scrub jays and trees, which has taken up a lot of their time. But we'll be talking about what the funding opportunities are so we've had two referendums. We had the 1990 that ran for 20 years, and that sunsetted in 2011. And then we have the referendum that we are currently under, started in 2004, and that sunsets in 2024.
Those monies that you guys were afforded via those votes, that goes to not only managing those properties but buying more properties. So, and how over the years, how has that changed? How many properties did the program start with? Based how many properties does it have now? How's that changed?
So there's probably it's a good question as far as the change. I'm not really sure I can answer that well. Other than right now, there's about probably 30 different actual properties. Each one of those properties was probably made up of a variety of different acquisitions, but they've all sort of landed in clumps of probably about 29 or 30 different clumps of property that we then group under one name, like the Fox Lake Sanctuary or the Enchanted Forest or whatever. So they fall under one management plan.
Let's say somebody has never been to an eel property and they wanted to start by going to one. Where would you suggest they take their first trip?
Enchanted Forest. Yeah, that was the very first property we purchased. It was the flagship property. It was originally acquired by the Nature Conservancy, and then the county purchased it from them. It was slated for development, and it's just beautiful. It's a great example of an eel site. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something I heard somebody tell me the other day that the county was taking all the pristine properties and saving them for themselves. And I said, there's so much more to it than that. These properties that are being put aside are for future generations and for these endangered and protected species. And how do you guys consistently battle that education side of it? I mean, it's got to be a consistent battle of trying to explain to people exactly what these properties are for and how they can use them and what they can get out of them.
Yeah, we deal with that a lot. The Malabar example is a good one too, because there's lots of, I mean, social media is what it is, and it can get out of control pretty quickly. But there's a lot of people out there who have this perception that somehow the land is that the purpose of the clearing of the land is to eventually sell it for development. And people get confused on a lot of the things that happen. Like some years ago, it was really just about 2 years ago, we did an exchange of some land in Grant, Valcaria, that was a Florida Inland Navigation District. So that was where the county exchanged a piece of property, not one that was purchased, but one that had been donated. So it was all done to protect the Florida scrub jay. So to move a development for the protection of the lagoon, for dredge spoil, to move it into an area where there were fewer to almost no scrub jays, as opposed to being built in an area where you had literally the best scrub jay habitat in Brevard County. So people are taking that story and turning it and thinking that the purpose for the tree clearing at Malabar Scrub is more about future development. But these lands there's so many ways that these lands are protected long term. I mean, not only are a lot of them are in state title, but they have conservation easements on them. So the concept of being able to turn around and develop one of these is very, very, very difficult. The only way you could ever do something like that is if it was determined that the property, that the scientists agreed that it was no longer needed for conservation, and that the money was better spent somewhere else. And that's only happened once in the history of the program at Tycho Airport. So there was a small piece. There was a big plan to acquire this whole big area. Only one little tiny piece could be acquired, and the rest of the stuff was just all developed around it. So it made sense to sell that and take those resources and put them back into other conservation areas. And that's a key thing too, is that the voters put this in place. So you can't take the bond resources that were used to buy a piece of property and then turn around and sell the land and use those resources for some other type of county use. It would be laundering money. It would be against the law. You couldn't do that. It's very specific.
That's important. People know that.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. How often do you get the same question I get? Where are the eels at on the eels properties? I get that at least once a month, and I'm like, well, there are mud puppies. Like, is that what you're talking about, a mud puppy? And nobody knows what a mud puppy is, so never seen a mud puppy?
No idea.
It's not actually a dog. Can you want to explain what a mud puppy is, Mike?
I would probably do a terrible job explaining that.
I always say it's like
I was
going
to make a joke about it being the legless mud puppy.
Yes,
but
yes, exactly.
probably no such thing.
It's they're kind of like an alien almost. When you see one the first time and you don't know what you're looking at.
So they're sort of like a salamander, right? Or
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. They're a bizarre critter. It's a whole different. If you haven't seen a mud puppy, Google it. Also, if you haven't seen a grampus, you should look up what a grampus is. You've seen those in the old properties. The Ragroons.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. That's a weird looking critter.
Yeah. You want something that'll scare the ever living fire out of you? That's the contraption right there. Whew.
I haven't seen one of those in years.
I see them quite a bit. I do a lot of surveys on the old properties, and as Mike knows, I'm telling the viewers this, and I come across those things quite a bit. They also call them a whip-tailed scorpion. They'll shoot some sort of acidic acid, right?
Yeah.
Out of their tail. They don't actually have a stinger, but they have big tail. They'll kind of point at you and shoot things. They got big claws. They look like a what they
I'm
look
gonna
like.
have nightmares tonight.
They look like a crawdad, but they got big crazy legs. They're interesting.
And they're big too. They're
Yeah.
like, yeah.
They're monstrous. First time I saw one, I was very taken back.
Now, the Enchanted Forest.
Is
Good-
this,
good-
another,
are
is this
there-
another can of worms?
Good
No,
change.
no, no.
Good change.
What I want to know is,
I went on a parallel there.
are there any monkeys back there?
You know, that is such a great story.
Oh
yeah.
Lord.
Oh no, I got a great story about the monkeys because I have had firsthand experience with the monkeys,
Yeah.
and you know, it was like back in the '80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just didn't know if they were still
No.
back in there at
No,
all.
you know, lots of people have told those stories, and we've never had any evidence of anything back there.
Okay, well, I would tell you,
Not like Silver Springs, at least.
in the
That's
'80s,
true.
I worked at there at 50 and US 1,
Mhm.
and in the back in the woods there was a family of like 5 monkeys that lived back there, and we made the horrible mistake of feeding them.
Mm.
And that was it. And then they were just so smart. They had trampled down the top of a tree, and they'd have a lookout.
Mm.
Somebody was up there, and then they would come in and steal food from us. And we got, I think it was an alligator trapper that came out and caught one of them in an alligator trap, in a cage type thing. This was in the 80s.
Huh.
And because I guess they came from whatever that theme park was.
Yeah, the
that
Johnny
was-
Weissmuller.
Johnny
Yeah.
Weissmuller spot. Yeah.
yeah, that was there. And so I just didn't know if they still existed at all or if they had all been gathered up. So
I've
I
spent a lot of
guess-
time on that property back there. I've sure never seen one.
Yeah,
Okay.
never. Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard that my grandfather used to tell those stories that when he worked for FP&L in the early 70s, and he said that when they would sit down back there and have lunch, the monkeys would come out of the woods and steal their sandwiches.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
one
a
of
long
them
time ago.
One of them came down. I had a box in my car, and he came into my car, took the box,
Wow.
and
Bold.
went up in the tree and was trying to figure out if it was food or not. And I was throwing rocks at him to get him to drop it. And he dropped it, and then he came down the tree and rushed me.
Wow.
And yeah, that was a very they're mean looking.
Yeah, that's a real problem at Silver Springs now, right? I've heard
Mhm.
a lot of people that they jump right into your canoe.
Yep, and
They have the opportunity.
they're protected as their own species now, I believe, right?
Really?
They're a subspecies. They protected them. Yeah, nobody can touch them.
That's a shame.
Wow.
It's there's a lot of ways to look at it. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one alone. And so I have some trivia. If
Okay.
you guys are ready for it. Oh, so what Super Bowl thoughts? Anybody Super Bowl thoughts? Cindy, you love sports, so
you
I'm
know
asking.
me in
Tell us-
sports.
Tell
Tell
us.
us
I
all
want you to
about-
break the game down for me and tell me what you thought.
I watched not 1 minute of that game.
Did you watch the Puppy Bowl?
No.
I watched some Puppy Bowl.
I watched the halftime show later on YouTube, though. I had to.
You had to.
I had to.
You had to. Why did you have to?
Because those musicians, those are from my era. That's when I was a teenager.
How long ago was that? I'm just kidding. So no. Who was in the halftime show?
Eminem, 50 Cent, Mary J. Blige. Yeah, oh, come on.
Dr. Dre, come on,
Dr.
Snoop
Dre?
Dogg, they were all there. Don't you know any of this?
God, Frank.
I don't know.
You're not very dripping right now.
Yeah, that's a whole different story. But I am. My hair's all fresh. I'm looking nice.
You are.
Leave dripping Frank out of it. So I went to a couple Super Bowl parties. So I kind of went in between a couple different places and just had some great food. But yeah,
I
other
went
than
for
that,
a hike.
There was I didn't get very much excitement out of the game. That didn't do a whole lot for me.
I usually irritate anybody that I watch a sporting event with because I literally don't care who wins. So I just root for whoever's supposed to lose. And apparently that upsets people.
It does.
Oh, yes.
It
People get
definitely
real
does.
bent out of
Yeah.
shape
Yeah.
about that.
They really do. They really do. That's one way to fire people up. All right, Brevard trivia. This is Brevard trivia since we have
Brevard trivia.
Mr. Brevard on the
Okay.
on the show. Okay.
Mr. Brevard.
Yep, I'm calling you Mr. Brevard, Mike.
All right.
That's your new nickname. I'm gonna call you that from now on, Mr. Brevard. All right. So you guys ready? Here we go. This area gained national attention after discovery of 200 burials dating back 7,000 or 8,000 years.
Wendover.
It was.
Oh yeah,
It was
the
Windover.
Windover,
job,
the Windover dig.
I finally knew one.
There you go.
You nailed it too. That was good. Number 2, Cocoa Beach holds an annual half marathon where many participants wear clothes based off a TV show filmed in Brevard years ago.
I Dream of Jeannie.
Indeed.
I Dream of Jeannie. Yeah.
2
Are we
for
keeping
2.
score?
2 for 2.
Cocoa Beach.
Yes, indeed, Cocoa Beach. Number 3, before 321, what was our area code?
407.
It
Right.
was. Remember when it used to be long
then-
distance to call from Titusville to Melbourne?
Mhm.
And then before that, it used to be 305.
Really?
That's true.
It was 305, and then Miami got 305, and then we got 407 with Orlando, and then we got 321.
How long ago was that?
That would have been
In the 70s, when I moved here, it was 321. I mean, not 321, but 305. 305, and then probably like in the 80s, we went to 407.
it was still, when I was a little itty bitty guy, it was still 305, and it changed, I want to say 85 or 86.
Yeah,
to
somewhere in
407.
there. Somewhere in there.
Maybe it was always so cool living in Port St. John because it was not long distance to call anywhere in the county. But if you were in Titusville, it was long distance to call Rockledge or Melbourne. And if
Right.
you were in Melbourne, it was long distance to call Titusville. It was, the whole thing was
Oh,
messed
yeah,
up.
my parents live in Satellite Beach, and I was in Titusville, so it's a long-distance call for me to call them, yeah.
Yep. If you were in Port St. John, you were set, though.
That's right,
Yep.
because you're actually in Cocoa.
Yep. It was, yeah. It is what it is. All right, number 4, because I scratched out number 4 and actually made it number 5, but let's not get into that. Yeah, what is the current population of Brevard County? Guess. It's so in 1860 it started with 246 people. Any idea what it is?
546,000.
It's
something.
450-something thousand.
340,000.
According to census numbers, we are over 600,000.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay.
Just think about that, though. We started with a couple hundred in 1860. That's
Well,
nuts.
I got news for you, Frank. Most places started with like a couple hundred, and then it built from there.
That's true. You got a point. Okay. Our first library in Brevard was started by a group of women in what city in 1895?
Cocoa.
It was Cocoa.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, indeed, it was Cocoa. Number 7, on old maps from anywhere from 1500 to 1844, the Brevard area was known as what?
Swamp.
So it was known as this all the way from the Jacksonville area all the way to Miami along the coast. It's had this one name.
Wasn't this on the first show?
I-
No,
We
that
did
was
this-
that was the river. That
No. You did.
I feel like I should
Yes,
know this,
and we
I
should
don't
know
know
it,
it.
yes. because I can't remember.
it was
I'm
the
a
Indian River we
failure.
were talking about that time. It had a different name. This was the county.
No, because
I never went over this
Okay.
one. I promise I didn't.
okay, if the answer, we'll both know and we'll jump on.
I
you.
promise it's not.
Okay.
I did look back at that. It was the name of the county back, or the Indian River back then was called something else.
Okay.
Or it was the Titusville area is what it was. This is the whole county, which again, the whole county took up the whole eastern side of the state at that point.
So wasn't it like Biscayne
That was again, that was
or
the,
Biscay?
yeah. That was
That was
the
the thing.
river. Yeah. That was the
okay,
Biscay
That
thing.
was the river.
He's on point. He
Okay.
remembers it.
Okay. So then
It was Mosquito County.
Mosquito County,
Yeah.
aptly named.
It should have stayed that way, personally speaking. I think it should have. We have a lot of hungry mosquitoes.
We do.
We have a lot of very hungry mosquitoes. So I brought you guys a few things besides the giant bird.
Oh, the giant bird was that? That's not all? There's more?
Mike, I brought you a shirt and your shirt.
All right.
Enjoy,
Awesome.
sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Curtis, you've been needing one of these.
Uh-oh, I've been needing something.
That'll look great on your
Uh-oh.
desk, I think. You can harass the kids with it.
It's the
The,
bobblehead.
the bobblehead.
Yep.
The alligator Rob bobblehead.
And then I brought you guys each a couple of books too.
And Chance
Just-
the Snapper.
Yep. It's a double bobble, so you
double
can
bobble.
you can bobble my head and the gator's head. You can harass both of us at the same time.
Oh,
That's
wow. That is
amazing.
so cool. Thank you.
But let's see. Trying to think what else we have coming up. You guys have anything else exciting coming up this week? I'm trying to think if I do. Ooh, I'm going to the south end of the county tomorrow to catch more snakes. I'm super excited. Super duper excited.
Are you going to wear gloves this time? Or?
Yes, I'm going to wear gloves and see if I can not make myself bleed everywhere. Try to be intelligent about it. Last time I It was green water snakes, and I got grabby, and they got grabby back, and it was a giant
do
bloody
that.
mess.
Where are you going?
The far south end of the county. Yep.
What kind of snakes?
They'll be green water snakes. Yep. It'll be amazing. He's a handsome fella, isn't he? Look at him. That is a handsome fella. And he's always just bobbling, just strangely bobbling all the time. But yeah, Mike, thanks so much for being here on the
Sure.
podcast with us. We really appreciate that. If people want to learn more about the EEL program, where should they go?
You can go to eelbrevard.com.
And you guys, I know, sometimes have some opportunities for volunteering at some of the different educational sites. Where would they go to do that?
You can reach out to each of our 3 education centers, and they have volunteer programs there. So that's the Enchanted Forest in Titusville, Sam's House, Merritt Island, and Barrier Island Center in South Melbourne Beach. And all that information is on the website. Okay,
Awesome. Cindy, Mr. Curtis, thank you guys a bunch. Another one in the book.
Yep.
All right. If you guys would like to donate to what we're doing, the podcast or EERSS, you can go to EEARSS.org or alligatorrob.com. Appreciate you all, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.